What's up, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Kelly. Today we're going to be talking about training for your goal. So most people come into our program with the goal of fat loss, but what they don't realize is that the way that they are training does not best benefit that goal. For instance, when people switch into fat loss mode, many times they have this black and white thinking. The first month, we try to really get rid of that black or white thinking and get people to the minimum effective dose so that all variables in the fat loss equation are easy to determine whether or not there is an issue or an adjustment needs to be made. So the first step is designating the appropriate deficit and then looking at what the person is doing for activity, because that's going to be a major factor when it comes to them getting hungry in the evening if they've been doing too much activity. The calorie deficit is the next phase. I look at the deficit and I watch the person's behavior, and if they're able to actually maintain that deficit without binging on the weekends, we know we've got it nailed. While we have to make adjustments along the way, most people are very comfortable in a 250 to 300 calorie deficit, where a lot of programs start you out in a 500 to 1,000 calorie deficit. And that's not the problem with the program necessarily, it's the problem with impatient dieters. Most people want instant results, so they start to jump on the bandwagon of, well, I think I can go into a 1,000 calorie deficit, until they can't. So that's what we do. We look at whether or not the person can sustain the results long term and they're enjoying this nutrition program for the long haul, because if not, they're going to fall back into the American population that loses the fat only to regain it back and then start feeling guilty and shameful for doing so. So the best type of training for a fat loss phase is going to be walking and also strength training. And a lot of people think they have to strength train 5 or 6 days a week, where actually 3 or 4 would probably be better depending on how great or extreme your deficit is, because that's going to be comfortably something that you can recover from during your dieting phase. Where if you were actually eating at maintenance, you wouldn't have to worry so much about being able to train 4 or 5 days a week if you really enjoy that, or even 5 or 6. Because your body will have the micros and the macronutrients to actually recover. It's not going to be under a bunch of stress because it's actually looking for food to prioritize getting those micronutrients and macros back into the system for repair. So a lot of times I have people start with just walking first and doing 3 or 4 days of strength training. Now, we also focus in our program on your brain type. We've got the 1A, the 2A, the 1B, and the 2B, and we also have the 3. And so for 3s, a lot of times I don't recommend strength training because it's not something that they enjoy doing. So we actually use walking 5 or 6 days a week with 1 or 2 rest days, and those might be days where we decide as a team, my client and I, that we actually are going to go a little bit lower on carb intake. That will make the deficit a little bit bigger on those days, and the other days that they walk don't become risk or reward related. It's just a day where they're going to pick to take a full rest day and maybe go a little bit lower on their energy from carbohydrates that day. It is not something where they don't get fed because they didn't get rewarded for doing activity. Hands down, your composition is definitely going to look better if you continue to strength train and you've been doing that, or maybe you've been slacking a little bit, but now you really want to work and focus on the recomposition of your body. Meaning you want to change the way that your body looks by losing body fat, maintaining lean muscle mass, and maybe even starting to build lean body mass at the end of your diet. I feel that people need to shift in and out of dieting phases and go into more maintenance phases throughout the year, but that's just my personal experience as a coach, working with thousands of people who have taken themselves from really good to excellent, and they've been able to maintain that excellent physique because they have a sustainable approach to it. Going to the gym isn't a job. Going to the gym isn't something that they hate. They actually really look forward to it because they only do it 3 or 4, maybe 4 or 5 times a week instead of going every single day like a job. So one thing that I would recommend is just starting the walking if you have been doing no activity at all. Start walking 2 or 3 days a week. Try to do 20 to 30 minutes if you can. And the next week, take it up to 30 to 40 minutes. Or change the frequency. Maybe you go to now 3 to 4 days a week for 20 to 30 minutes. That does matter because, again, if we are out there getting our activity in, we're burning extra calories, which means we don't have to drop into a bigger deficit with our food. Some people prefer to use their food. Some people prefer to have a little bit more activity and use cardio, walking, strength training, or their activity base to kind of support where they're at with their intake. I also see a lot of confusion with things in recomposition, like I want to get a better set of glutes. Well, that is also going to take time. But you don't need to do these fancy exercises that you see on Instagram where you're doing 4 or 5 different glute cueing exercises before you actually start training the glutes. Maybe you do 1 or 2 of these glute band exercises to start cueing the glutes, and then you get into your workout and you make the best use of the time and the space that you have at the gym by using weights for progressive overload. Bodybuilding and recomposition can be fairly monotonous, so in order for you to make it fun and something that you enjoy, you might want to have a little bit of variety in with your bodybuilding compound exercises. Maybe you do a day where you do circuits or supersetting, and then you do rested sets. And you're always looking for something just a little bit different, maybe going on a hike or doing a yoga class or a Pilates class or something different entirely from what you're doing with your goals as far as recomp. Now again, you want to make sure that this is not going to be something that gets in the way of your progress with recomposition. So for instance, if you decide in a recomp that you're going to run a 10K or a marathon or a half marathon, those are conflicting goals. You might want to train for one thing and then train for the other. Remember, any goal will take time, and building muscle and recomposition should be fun. You should also be doing these phases when you're at more of a maintenance phase versus being in a strict and big calorie deficit. When you're shooting towards fat loss, that should be a goal for a short period of time. When you're shooting for a recomp, that should be a longer and more dedicated fun period where you still have structure, but you have a little bit more flexibility with your eating and you have a lot more fun with your training because you've got the extra calories to do so. If you found this video enjoyable, please let me know what you'd like to see more of, and I hope you'll join us back next Monday for Conversations with Kelly.